1919 was an auspicious year in history. The First World War ended, ushering a drastic change in the world order. The Philippine Islands had been a U.S. territory for 2 decades and was promised independence under the Jones Law of 1916. Progressive reformers saw the country and its people as a major target for modernization, and education was its main weapon. 7 forward-looking Filipinas came together in 1919 to create a school where young women could gain the knowledge and skills that would make them modern women. Paz Marquez Benitez was the first president of the Philippine Women's College. Jose Abad Santos was its first chairman of the Board of Trustees. Francisca Tirona Benitez was the second president, and with her husband Dean Conrado, guided the school from a house on A. Flores Street to its iconic Taft Avenue campus. In 1932, the college became a university, making PWU the first university for women in Asia founded by Asians. It provided a space where innovations in education flourished, and young people were encouraged to be the best that they could be. For over 100 years, the Philippine Women's University has been known as a leader in quality education. In 1934, PWU moved into its main campus on Taft Avenue, and since the 1970s has been co-educational. Located in the heart of Metro Manila, it is easily accessible by public transport and surrounded by affordable housing. Today's PWU offers undergraduate and graduate courses in several fields of study. Its business and management programs are responsive to the needs of industry, using evolving technology for global competence. PWU graduates excel in arts and sciences, education, social work, and diplomacy. Its fine arts and music programs have produced outstanding graduates through a holistic education that treasures heritage as well as excellence. PWU has pioneered in fields such as food science, nutrition and dietetics, medical technology, pharmacy, and nursing. PWU continues to play an essential role in producing graduates who possess the skills that make them competitive in the country and anywhere in the world. In 1919.
Good day. We have few reminders before we begin the webinar proper. Make sure that you have a stable internet connection to avoid missing important topics of the webinar. Please type your questions in the comment box for the open forum. Type your name and department to be recognized. You may take down notes that will help you remember key points from the speakers. We would like to know your feedback by filling up the evaluation survey. Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Isa Donna Togbo, your Master of Ceremony for this day. Thank you all for taking your time in joining us in today's webinar. I would also like to express my gratitude for supporting us on our previous webinar. On behalf of the Philippine Women's University Medical Specialist and Diagnostic Center, in cooperation with the School of Nutrition, We welcome you to our second webinar entitled Boost Your Immune System with Proper Nutrition Pre- and Post-COVID-19 Vaccination. The Philippine government is continuously implementing the COVID-19 vaccination program, and it is currently being administered among essential workers and belonging to the AFAR priority group. According to the World Health Organization, COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective in protecting people against COVID-19 infection. It prepares our immune system to recognize and fight the virus. To give us insights about the body's response to COVID-19 vaccine, this webinar aims to create awareness on the importance of strengthening our body with proper nutrition for pre- and post-COVID-19 vaccination. Before we proceed, let us start this program with a prayer and followed by the Philippine National Anthem. Let us hear from Ms. Vanessa Ceballos, Program Chair of the School of Nutrition, as she delivers the opening remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Isa. To Dr. Nini Lim, the overall chair of the COVID-19 Vaccination Campaign Program, to our distinguished speakers, Dr. Nilios and Dr. Ritondo Samin, to the PWU community, to the organizing team of this webinar, and of course to all our guests and viewers out there, a pleasant afternoon to all of you. First, I would like to thank our organizers and speakers for taking their time out of their busy schedules to share with us the perspective and information about the importance of boosting our immune system through proper nutrition before and after COVID-19 vaccination. Last April 29, 2021, we held the very first COVID-19 vaccination webinar campaign initiated by the Philippine Women's University with the aim of informing our community and alleviating the fears of engaging in the vaccination for COVID-19. As we are still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the local and international agencies have been working together on a critical response and intervention needed to develop and deploy the safe and effective vaccines. The World Health Organization believes that in order for us to achieve the indirect protection from the infectious disease, we need to train our immune systems to create the antibodies through vaccination. Based on the official data collated by our World in Data last June 21, 2021, 21.8% of the world population has received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. In the Philippines, there are already 8,407,342 doses of vaccine given as of June 21, 2021. In line with the Philippine government's response and dissemination campaign about COVID-19, a collaborative effort of the PWU management and the organizing team of this webinar aims to help our community in achieving the herd immunity we are all aiming for. Without further ado, it is my great honor to welcome you all in our second webinar activity entitled as Boost Your Immune System Through Proper Nutrition Pre- and Post-COVID-19 Vaccination. I hope that we will all have a great, informative, and motivational afternoon, and of course, with the help of our invited guest speakers. On behalf of the whole organizing team, thank you and have a safe and healthy good day.
Moving right along, I am pleased to welcome our University President, Mr. Marco Alfredo Benitez, for his inspirational message.
Good afternoon to the members of the PW community and everyone watching on our social media pages. I'd like to thank the organizers, our COVID-19 Vaccine Information Campaign Committee, led by Dr. Nini Lim and Vanessa Ceballos, our MSDC and PW School of Nutrition, for the second webinar installment in our effort to educate our community and the general public on the importance not only of vaccines in combating the pandemic, but also on ways to boost our immune system pre- and post-vaccination. Thank you to our guest speakers, Dr. Christy Redondo Samin, nice to see you again, and Dr. Bien Nilios. Thank you for spending this afternoon sharing with us your knowledge and expertise. As of June 27, the country has already vaccinated approximately 2.5 million Filipinos, or roughly 2% of the population. We're averaging 236,000 vaccinations per day, the highest 7-day average since the start of the campaign in March, but still just a third of the 600,000 daily vaccination target needed to achieve herd immunity by December 2021. Much of the reason for the slow rollout of vaccinations has really been the unavailability of vaccines globally. But with more and more vaccine doses arriving, Sinovac, Pfizer, and Moderna from COVAX in the US, Sputnik, and even the private sector procured vaccines, the government is hoping to further ramp up vaccinations in the coming weeks and months. While the vaccines remain to be our most potent weapon in ending the pandemic, we must remember that while integral, it is only one of the many defenses against the virus. Critical as well is our adherence to the proper health and hygiene protocols, wearing of masks and face shields, proper hand washing, social distancing and minimizing close contacts, and probably the least talked about but equally important, making sure that we have a strong immune system to combat the virus. While most webinars talk about the importance of getting vaccinated, the different types of vaccines available, possible adverse effects, and even the emergence of new variants of SARS-CoV-2, today's webinar will delve into how we can ensure a strong immune system pre and post vaccination with proper nutrition. By eating the proper food, those rich in vitamins and minerals, drinking plenty of water, and getting enough exercise and rest, we can naturally strengthen our body's immune system against COVID-19 and any other sickness or disease that may lead to hospitalization and even death. Thus, proper nutrition, adherence to safety and health protocols, and finally, vaccination provides us an overarching strategy to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe in the middle of this pandemic. Once again, thank you to the organizers for this very relevant and timely webinar. I would like to take this opportunity to again encourage our PW community to get vaccinated as soon as possible. As of last week, roughly just 10% of our full-time and part-time employees have submitted their completed vaccination cards to HRMO. I hope that many more have already registered and plan to get vaccinated soon, or have already gotten their first dose of the vaccines. We are hearing of countries fully opening up as a result of mass vaccinations, slowly getting back to how things were before the pandemic. We hope to get there soon as well. But with the emergence of new, more infectious variants, we really have to get vaccinated to keep ourselves, our loved ones, and especially our students safe. No one is safe until all of us are safe. So please get vaccinated. We will overcome this pandemic together. Thank you very much and have a very informative afternoon.
Thank you, President Marco Benitez, for those inspiring words. And now, I would like to call Ms. Vanessa Ceballos to introduce our first guest speaker for this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Isa. To introduce our first speaker for this afternoon, at present, he is the Municipal Health Officer of Ilog Negros Occidental, an Associate Professor of the University of St. Lasal, Bacolod City, College of Medicine in De La Salle University, Manila, in Behavioral Science Department. Is the former Medical Scientific Liaison Manager of Sanofi Aventis Philippines, a former Director of Operations in Zulik Family Foundation in Parañaque City. In addition to all his present and past professional experiences, our first speaker for this afternoon was awarded with grand distinction for Most Outstanding Doctor to the Barrios in 2009. Without further ado, let us all welcome Dr. Bien L.P. Nilios. Good afternoon, Dr. Nilios.
Good afternoon. Thank you, ma'am, for that very kind introduction. First of all, thank you for inviting me, the PWU community. And it's nice to be among nutritionists as well, because I'm also currently the Municipal Nutrition Action Officer of my municipality. So it's very nice to be in your presence and to be invited to talk about something that we're all passionate about how to keep people safe from this pandemic through vaccination and other means. So I'm here to talk about the virus itself first and the disease. So we need to know the enemy first so that we would know how to approach it and how to ready ourselves against this constant threat. So let me just share my slides with you. Let me just share my slides with you guys. Okay, I hope you can see my slides. So I'm gonna talk about COVID-19 as we know it, maybe a little throwback to where we've been through, to where we started, and where are we heading from here. So when I teach community medicine in the College of Medicine, I usually introduce the epidemiologic triad for us to really understand how do we control infectious diseases in the community. And if we review the epidemiologic triad, according to the theory, there are at least three aspects of, or three factors that can contribute to the prevalence of an infection in the community. And these are the presence of an agent, a causative agent. So it could either be a virus, a bacteria, a fungi, a protozoa. It could be different microorganisms. Of course, the presence of the host. And when we talk about host, we usually refer to people, humans, at least in our application, because we are dealing with human medicine here. Of course, there also has to be an enabling environment. So we talk about the characteristics of the environment. Where do people live? Where do they reside? What's the biological, physical, and psychosocial aspects of this environment? And some experts would add a fourth element to this triangle, which is time. Because this is where we talk about elements of incubation period, the trends, the cycles, the seasons, what time of the year does usually this disease appear or get more prevalent. So I would like to use this lens to lay the template for my presentation this afternoon. So first, let's talk about the agent, which in this case, we already know it's a virus. So when we say COVID-19, COVID-19 is actually the name of the disease. But if you talk about the virus, the name of the virus is actually SARS-CoV-2, or the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. That is the official name of the virus that's causing the disease, which is COVID-19. And it's very pathogenic, which means it can cause disease or illness in a person. And it is highly transmissible, which means it can be passed on from one person to another. And historically, it was first identified in Wuhan, China, which is actually in the Hubei province. There were actually 7 patients who were admitted in a Jinyantan hospital in Wuhan who were diagnosed with pneumonia, but a very peculiar pneumonia. And when they did further study, 5 of those 7 patients manifested a novel virus. When we talk about novel, something new, something we didn't have before. And when they started to analyze the virus, they soon found out that it's actually a coronavirus, a type of coronavirus. And coronavirus is not the coronavirus itself is not actually new. We had coronaviruses before, if you remember the MERS-CoV, right? So the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus, which is actually a coronavirus. And we had SARS before in the early onset of the 21st century. It was also a coronavirus. But what they found out with this typical coronavirus 2 is it's a different line. So it came off from a different line, and it's somewhat related to the RATG13 type of coronavirus, which is common among bats. So you can only find the RATG13 coronaviruses in bats, which means they suspect that this infection really started as a zoonotic infection. When we say zoonotic, it means it's a type of infection that we get from animals. When it's an infection passed on from an animal to a human, it's zoonotic. So they started to study the virus throughout the early parts of the year 2020, and they were able to classify and categorize it according to its correct subgroup of coronaviruses. So they found out that there are 4 different genera or groups of this coronavirus family. And usually the alpha and the beta subgroup or genera, as we could call them, are usually common only among mammals. And the delta, the gamma families are usually common among birds. The avian flu is somewhat related to that kind of virus. They call it coronavirus because of its appearance. It looks like a crown, it's circular. Because of its spikes, it appears like a crown. So it has spike proteins around its membrane, and it's actually an RNA virus. Okay, it's a ribonucleic acid. RNA is just like DNA, but it only differs in the type of nucleic acids that it has. So RNA has two different types of nucleic acids which cannot be found in DNA. So, but they're both genetic materials, and it's being used by the virus to replicate itself. So it's basically the blueprint of the virus. So just like any virus, it needs to enter a host. So in this case, it started off with animals as a host, and then later it evolved and was able to transmit itself and live inside a human host. And that's what we know now as SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so, and like I said, we already had we have already had SARS coronavirus before, and that's your first SARS epidemic or pandemic, and your Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus, or your MERS-CoV. And then now we have our SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so how can this virus be killed? So what's the physical characteristics of this virus? According to studies, ultraviolet radiation can actually inactivate your SARS-CoV-2, or if you apply heat at 56 degrees centigrade for 30 minutes, it can also be inactivated. But it is also sensitive to other disinfectants, which common disinfectants like your ethanol, your chlorine, your chloroforms. So your most widely accessible disinfectants can actually physically kill or inactivate this virus. And further studies also revealed that the virus, when present in stainless steel or plastic material, they're actually more stable, and they can actually stay there for up to maybe 72 hours if you try to place them in this kind of environment. So they're more stable if you put them in cardboards or copper type of materials. So like your doorknobs, your typical objects that we use in daily living. So most of them are made of plastic or stainless steel. So your SARS-CoV can actually stay there for up to 72 hours the most. So as mentioned, because it started with bats, somewhat related to the RATG13 virus, type of virus, the coronavirus. So it started with bats. However, it was epidemiologists and virologists thought that there has to be an intermediary between the bat and the human population for this coronavirus to transfer to the human population. So, for example, for your first SARS-CoV, it was suspected that the civets were the intermediary host, whereas the MERS-CoV, the camels, were the intermediary host. And for this latest SARS-CoV, or COVID-19 virus, they found out that, or they suspect it's the pangolin, but this was not yet definitely concluded, but they suspect that the pangolin was the intermediary host for this virus before it actually entered into the human population and evolved and able to transmit itself from human to human. Okay. So a little throwback, as mentioned earlier, it started in Wuhan, China. The first outbreak was there, And the outbreak started in the middle of 2019 all the way to the latter quarter of 2019. But it was only in 2020 when the WHO declared a pandemic, because some cases already spilled out of the borders of Wuhan and China, found its way in other countries, particularly in the Philippines. We had our first case sometime around January or February of 2020, and then our country, of course, locked down March 2020, and we have been on lockdown ever since then. Okay. Initial investigation also suggested that majority of the cases were actually associated with a particular seafood market in China. So, in that market, they're not only selling seafood, but they're also selling other live wild animals. And that means it was through those live wild animals, perhaps, that this virus from bats found its way into the human population. That's why that particular seafood market was closed that year. And then, of course, they started to further investigate how that virus came about from that particular market. So, as of the moment, COVID-19 patients, meaning the positive patients who are diagnosed to be positive of COVID-19, are the main source of infection. So we could not anymore blame the wild animals, because a lot of our populations are living far from the wildlife. So we could not say that it's the wild animals that's still bringing in a lot of the infection into our human population. It's already in the human population. So the main source of infection are usually those who are infected themselves. And they're the ones spreading the infection to the healthier subgroups of the population. And of course, the severe patients or patients manifesting the severe form of COVID-19 are considered to be more contagious than those manifesting with milder signs and symptoms. However, studies also show that even the patients who don't manifest any signs and symptoms, or the asymptomatics, are also shedding the virus, which means they can also transmit the virus to other healthy people. So we should never be complacent, even if we don't feel anything, even if you're not manifesting any signs and symptoms. If we are carrying SARS-CoV-2 virus, or the SARS-CoV-2 in us, we can still transfer it to other people. So how do we know if you have the virus or not? The only way to know is you get yourself tested, right? Your RT-PCR test is the gold standard test to check whether you are with COVID-19. And of course, now we have available tests like your antigen, your rapid antigen tests, which can actually check for the presence of the antigen or the virus. So, but still guidelines are still being finalized with regards to the test, because literature would still indicate that your RT-PCR, your reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction test, is still the gold standard for testing whether a person is positive of COVID-19 or not. That's why in the community, we always encourage people who have been exposed to or suspected to have been exposed to a positive case, we always encourage them to have themselves tested, to get themselves tested for RT-PCR, because that is the only way we will know whether the virus has been transferred to them or whether they are also infected or harboring the virus in their bodies. And in the early part of 2020, literature would also tell us that the virus is transmitted either through respiratory droplets or contact transmission. So droplets is that when you cough, there's a little bit of moisture that comes out of your respiratory tract, and that's where the virus would kind of hitch And then if a person unluckily inhales air with those infected droplets, and then the virus can also find their way inside another person's body. However, that was the initial finding, that it is probably through droplets. But more and more evidence are pointing to the fact that COVID-19 can actually be airborne. So it can spread as aerosols. Because there are many evidences that even a person who is not physically proximal to a COVID-19 patient, and yet they still get infected with COVID-19. So there is no other conclusion but to say that perhaps the virus is already airborne. And in fact, around 200 scientists signed a manifesto convincing WHO to change their description about COVID-19. And because acknowledging this transmission changed the way we protect ourselves and and approach this virus, because that's the only way that is the only way to explain super spreader events, when the COVID-19 can spread through aerosols and airborne. So that's the only way, that's the only thing that can explain super spreader events. So that's the agent. So we already know it's a virus, which means your antibiotics like amoxicillin, other antibiotics such as that, your ciprofloxacins, they won't work because it's a virus. Your antiparasitic medications like your ivermectin, they won't work because it's a virus. And these medications were designed to destroy a particularly different class of microorganisms. And viruses are built in a different way than bacteria are and parasites are. So a lot of these medications that that we use as antibiotics or antiparasitics won't work for COVID-19 virus because it's a virus, okay? And even our current antiviral medications, your tamoxifens, your other antiviral drugs, they won't work for, they haven't been proven yet to work for this particular virus as well, okay? So there's no medication yet, but we know how to stop it, okay? We know how to destroy it. We can disinfect, we can stop ourselves from inhaling the virus because we already know how it gets into our body, how it gets out of our body, right? So the host, so we remember the epidemiologic triad. As an emerging infectious disease, all human beings are generally susceptible because it's emerging, it's a novel virus, which means no human being on the planet Earth back in 2020, early of 2020, has had the antibodies and the natural defense mechanism to destroy the virus when it enters the human body. So no human being has that particular natural defense mechanism yet because this is a new virus. Our body has not been exposed to it yet. So the body does not recognize it yet. It is not prepared yet to destroy this particular virus. And as the pandemic went along, we also found out that this virus hits the elderly population more seriously than the younger population, right? And persons who have what we call your comorbidities, such as asthma, diabetes, or other cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. So they are the people who are more susceptible to getting the SARS-CoV-2. In fact, other studies also show that smoking and obesity are also susceptible factors. So, if you a person who is in close contact with patients or subclinically symptomatic infected persons are part of this high-risk population. So who are these persons who are in close contact with patients? These are your medical frontliners. These are your health workers working in the community or in the hospital or in treatment facilities or in quarantine facilities. These are your caregivers who take care of people who are susceptible also to the virus. So and these are your people who are also more exposed, or also going to work, who are always out there in the streets. Your delivery personnel, your traffic enforcers, your transport sector. So these are all high-risk populations. And the families of these people are also high risk because they're also exposed to them. So how does the virus enter the body again? So the virus enters through your upper respiratory tract, your nasal cavity, of course, and the pharynx. So when you inhale the virus, it enters there, it undergoes replication, it stays there in the mucosa. Because of its spike proteins, it's able to latch onto the cells. So, and then it further goes into the lower respiratory tract, and that's where they also further multiply. And sometimes they get swallowed down our esophagus into the stomach, into the intestines, and that's where also they can multiply. That is why COVID-19 would also have gastrointestinal symptoms like diarrhea, for example. So because the virus can also multiply in the gastrointestinal tract. Of course, there are some other rare manifestations of the virus, right? You can also have other signs and symptoms, but the most common are usually the ones that are related to your respiratory, cough, difficulty of breathing, anosmia, unable to smell, unable to taste, and your GI tract, like your diarrhea, for example. How do they do that? Because, well, this is more medical, but because some of our tissues have what you call your angiotensin converting enzyme 2. This is actually a receptor being used by your virus for entry. Okay, so it's actually a type 1 membrane protein, and it's common in your lungs, in your heart, in your kidney, in your intestines, in your cardiovascular diseases. I'm pretty sure for those who are hypertensives out there, the term angiotensin converting enzyme might be familiar to you, because maybe some of you are taking medications like angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, like so your captoprils, your enalaprils. So because it is also related to regulation. Your angiotensin is also related to regulation of your blood pressure. Okay. And when your body is infected with SARS-CoV-2, it actually triggers a domino effect of inflammatory responses. So some experts would call it a storm of cytokines. Cytokines are just chemicals which actually being produced by your body as a response to an inflammation. And it's because of the presence of these cytokines that we experience all signs and symptoms of an inflammatory process. Fever, pain, all of that. So because of those response, your body experiences those kinds of signs and symptoms. And if the inflammatory response is so severe and your body cannot control and regulate it, and that would lead to the cause of death. That is actually the cause of death of most COVID-19 patients. This very severe inflammatory response. That is why it's very important to get yourself protected from it. This is just an illustration of a simulation of a population when a population is vaccinated at varying levels of vaccination coverage. So for example, if a population has 0% vaccination coverage, there's a high probability of the population getting infected. There's a high rate of infection in the population. Compare that with the population with a 95% vaccination coverage, there's almost zero infection rate in that particular population. So experts will say all we need for COVID-19 is a herd immunity of a vaccine coverage of around 60 to 70%. And then we can actually somehow have a better confidence against this virus. So that those are just simulation exercises. So where are we now? So yeah. Since last year, our COVID-19 virus, or SARS-CoV-2, has somehow mutated into at least 4 variants of concern. And the old name is, of course, the one with the alphanumerical name, B, for example, B117. That's the old name. The Greek alphabet labeling is just very recent because the experts don't want the general public to get confused with the naming of this variant. So they instead applied corresponding Greek alphabets or Greek letters to these particular variants. So for example, the variant that killed thousands of people in India, your B16172, is currently now called your Delta variant, okay? And that's one of the deadlier, highly transmissible variants that we have. And I think the last news I was able to get is that experts already confirming that we already have the Delta variant within our boundaries here, our borders in the Philippines. So we have to be extra careful of this variant. And why do viruses turn into different variants? It's because when viruses replicate, remember they have their RNA, right? When they replicate, when they build themselves using this blueprint that they have, there's always a tendency for this virus to undergo different changes when they replicate. So they can have mutations when they replicate. In other words, the copying of the blueprint may not exactly be 100%, right? So there could be different factors there. So the virus can get a few DNA copies from the human being, right? Because we also have DNA. So when it copies, it gets also some of the DNA material there, and it gets incorporated in the virus. And then, of course, there are certain processes like point mutations. Just by random choice of nature, the virus evolved. Okay, and then it turned out into a different kind of variant. It's still coronavirus, but it's now different in such a way that maybe the spikes are thicker and more adherent to a cell membrane. Maybe the virus is stronger in that aspect. Maybe the virus is weaker in that aspect. So it can also go both ways. A mutation might be deleterious to a virus. It can destroy a virus, or it can also enhance a virus. So again, so that's the possible. So how do we stop the formation of more variants? The only way to stop it is to stop further replication of this virus. And virus only replicates when it finds its way into another human being, right? So if we stop the transmission of the virus, we also stop the formation of these variants. Okay, so, and that's what experts say. So when a virus is widely circulating in a population, the likelihood of the virus mutating increases, of course, because the more opportunities a virus has to spread, the more it replicates, and the more opportunities for it to undergo changes. So the key there is to stop the spread. So how do we stop the spread? So of course, government has been mentioning about wearing of face masks, of staying home, social distancing, physical distancing, hand washing, and of course, vaccination. So those are key strategies that can help stop the spread of this virus. So the more we stop the spread, the less likelihood the virus will transform into a different variant that might be more dangerous to our human populations. So, talking about how to stop the transmission, we always talk about wearing of masks, and there are various evidences, various studies that show how masks are effective when properly used, are effective in the prevention of the spread of this virus. So Of course, some would say that the use of the mask alone is not sufficient. That's why there has to be some physical distancing accompanied by the wearing of the face mask. Okay. They did the simulations, for example. So because some strategies would do a lockdown, right? So there are some studies that would say that even if you don't do a community lockdown, for as long as 80% of the population are properly wearing face masks, the spread of the virus is also limited. It's also reduced. So for as long as a community is wearing face masks, the necessity to undergo a very strict lockdown may not be warranted, because just by wearing of the face mask alone, by 80% of the population can already stop the spread of the virus. How about face shield? This very controversial face shield. Face shields, okay, based on studies, it can actually reduce the short-term exposure to large infectious aerosol particles. But because we already know that COVID-19 is airborne, okay, airborne, so it can stay in the air for maybe 3 hours. So smaller particles can actually remain in the air longer. So if it's in the air longer, and if your face shield has gaps at the sides, so it can still flow around the face shield. So it can be more easily be inhaled. So the face shield is said to be is useful as an adjunct respiratory protection for workers caring for patients with respiratory infections. However, they cannot be used as a substitute for a respiratory protection that is needed. Okay, so that's very important there. And so how about wearing face shield and face mask? There was a study in Wayne State University School of Medicine that states that when you combine the two, wearing the face shield and the face mask, the difference between wearing the mask alone without the face shield is actually very little. In fact, there's almost no difference. So you can actually just wear the face mask and you don't have to wear the face shield because the protection is still the same. Okay. So, but however, if you're a health worker and in a hospital, for example, constantly exposed to COVID-19 patients, the wearing of face masks and face shields, it will give you the optimum protection against COVID-19 infection. Okay. So again, data is showing that our cases has increased since the time we started back in 2020. We just experienced our second surge in the outset of March of this year. And then if you see there in the graph, we have yet to go down our previous numbers last year. So we are still not out of the woods yet, although we are looking at some glimmer of hope. And we're looking at, in some areas, the cases are going down, but in some areas, the cases are also dramatically increasing. So there seems to be patches of areas in the whole country wherein there are some cases that are, in some areas that the cases are controlled, and in some areas that the cases are not yet totally controlled. So I think that's the challenge of having an archipelagic country wherein there are areas that are really subject to different protocols and different circumstances and conditions, so that controlling the entire archipelago may not be that efficient and effective. However, the arrival of the vaccine is somehow giving us some hope that we can actually regain some strand of normalcy in our life, especially for the health workers. We can regain some confidence in facing our COVID-19 patients. So I guess the challenge pa rin is still, we need to stay healthy, we still need to protect ourselves, we still need to protect others by ensuring that we are consciously following health protocols, not just for ourselves, but for other people, especially for our family. So that's only a snippet of what COVID-19 is. So again, thank you for inviting me, and I'm very happy to be be part of this very successful webinar that you are already handling. And congratulations to this initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nilos. We will now have the open forum to be moderated by Ms. Julia Lucia Briones from the School of Nutrition.
Thank you, Ms. Iza, and thank you, Dr. Nilos, for that very informative presentation. It's now time to open the floor for questions directed to Dr. Nilos. For our Facebook Live viewers, you may type your questions in the comment section. Also, we have already collected some questions from our participants upon the registration for our speakers. So for our first question, Dr. Nilos, they would like to know po, how many months are we protected from infection of the COVID-19 once the vaccine is already inside our body?
That's a very valid question, and in fact, the answer there is we don't have enough and sufficient evidence yet to say how long will this vaccine protect us from the virus. We are just collecting enough information from the real world application of this vaccine, and I think there are still ongoing studies, but I think I can confidently say that it is still very likely that once we get the vaccine doses, I'm pretty sure it will still be requiring some booster shots in the future, because we don't know yet. But that's just a personal opinion. So I might think that this is somewhat going to be similar like your flu vaccine, that we get it almost annually to get ourselves protected from the flu vaccine. Because remember, the virus has mutated and there are already 4 variants. So we also need to adapt our technology and catch up with this virus. So the answer there is we don't have enough evidence yet to say how long is our body protected from the virus once we get the full dose of our vaccines.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nilos. No? For our next question po, according to our participant, my 2 colleagues were fully vaccinated with Sinovac, meaning 2 doses were already administered. But how come they tested positive on COVID-19?
Well, yes. The vaccine never promised us that we will never get the virus, right? It will only protect us from its severe form. For example, I got vaccinated with against chickenpox when I was small, but I still got chickenpox. But the kind of chickenpox I had was somewhat benign and mild compared to the other children who had chickenpox but were never vaccinated for chickenpox in the first place. So it works in that manner as well. So even if you were vaccinated against COVID, completely vaccinated, there is still a very small chance of you getting the virus as well. But because you were vaccinated, there is a 100% chance that you will not die of its severe form. Because according to studies, 100% of those who were vaccinated, fully covered with either Sinovac or other brands of vaccine, did not die because of severe COVID-19. So that was the evidence there. So you can still get it, or maybe even before you had your, because some would say that they got positive, they were positive of COVID dahil sa vaccine. Actually, it's possible that maybe before your second shot, you were already exposed to the virus, and then nagkataon lang na nagkasabay yung vaccine mo, kaya nagka-positive ikaw. So again, we could not really give a full definite answer to that particular question, case to case siya. Pero yung general sagot dyan is, even if you had the vaccine, there's still a very small chance of you getting infected of the virus, but a very high probability that you will never get the severe form of COVID-19.
Thank you again, Dr. Nilios. It looks like we have a few more questions to answer now. Another question here is there an instrument or any device that can measure or check if one's immune system is strong or weak?
Okay. Well, in the past, there's a quantitative way to measure the amount of antibodies that your body has produced after you were vaccinated. So, for example, remember if you had your hepatitis B vaccination, you were asked to get a titer of your anti-HBs, your titer to check whether your body has already developed the antibodies against a particular virus. So that is one way to measure. But for COVID-19, according to experts, that is not yet the accepted way to measure whether your body has developed immunity against COVID-19. So in fact, they have yet to release particular guidelines on that matter. In fact, they discourage it. They discourage doing that. So checking your titer, your antibody titer after your COVID-19 vaccination will not tell you anything. But for other vaccines in the past, we use that for hepatitis B, particularly for hepatitis B. So we get your titer if you were able to, develop your antibodies against hepatitis B. So because there are many other, it's not only the function of antibodies, there are other functions there that would somehow help you in your defense mechanism. So for COVID-19, there is no guideline yet that would tell us how to check our bodies if our body has already developed immunity after complete vaccination against COVID.
We are having very good discussions here. Thank you again, Dr. Nilios. We still have a few more minutes to accommodate another question from our participants. So let us have another question. This one is asking, does the first dose of Sinovac vaccine will provide a little or no protection against severe symptoms of COVID-19?
No. According to evidence and according to studies, first dose of Sinovac or other brands that would require 2 doses will not give you sufficient protection yet. So for you to get sufficient protection against COVID-19, you need to get both doses. So if it's Sinovac, you need 2 doses. If it's AstraZeneca, you need 2 doses. So you need to get those 2 doses for you to have your body protected against COVID-19. So when you had your first shot of COVID-19 vaccine, please don't be complacent as if, okay na, pwede na akong gumala kasi nagka-first dose na ako, pwede na to, may 50% na yan siguro, di ba? Kasi 50%, dalawa. So hindi, that's not your 1 dose of 2 is not an equivalent to 50% protection po.
Okay, due to the interest of time, we will now have our last question directed to Dr. Nilios. So for the last question for Dr. Nilios, our question is, can vaccines, specifically COVID-19 vaccine, alter our metabolism?
alter your metabolism. No po. The vaccines are not in any way going to affect your metabolism po. So physiologically, it's not related to metabolism. It's something to do with improving your immune system. So which is not related to your metabolism, because your metabolism processes as a different process, and the development of your immune system is a different physiologic process. They're not in any way related, no, to each other. So your vaccines don't influence your metabolism, so it won't make you fat or it won't make you thin. So hindi po ganon. It won't work that way po. It also won't affect your fertility, because some people have been listening to this misinformation that the vaccine daw might affect their fertility. No, it doesn't affect fertility, and studies are already showing that it doesn't affect fertility. No, so it's safe to take, so it won't affect any of those physiologic processes of your body.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nilios, for answering all the questions our participants raised to you today. It was indeed a very informative discussion with you. To continue with our program, I will now give the floor back to Ms. Isa.
Thank you, Ms. Julia. May I now call Dr. Ramonet Tolentino to award the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Nilos.
The Philippine Women's University Taft Avenue, Manila, in cooperation with Medical Specialists and Diagnostic Center and School of Nutrition, present this Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Bien Eli P. Nilios for sharing his knowledge and expertise as a resource speaker on the topic, Understanding COVID-19 through the Lens of Community Medicine, for the program Boost Your Immune System with Proper Nutrition, Pre- and Post-COVID-19 Vaccination on June 29, 2021 from 1 to 4 p.m. via Facebook Live, given this 29th of June 2021. Signed by Dr. Nini Lim, Executive Director, MSDC, Ms. Vanessa Ceballos, Program Chair, School of Nutrition, and Mr. Marco Alfredo M. Benitez, University President.
Thank you po.
Salamat. Welcome po.
Thank you, Dr. Bien. And now I would like to call Ms. Vanessa Ceballos to introduce our second speaker for this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Isa. All right, so to introduce our second speaker for this afternoon, she is currently a clinical nutrition specialist at St. Luke's Medical Center, Quezon City. She is the head of the Medical Nutrition and Weight Management Center in Premier Medical Center in Nueva Ecija. She is an active member and a board of trustee in the Philippine Society for Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition. She is the chairperson of Research Development Unit of Dr. Paulino J. Garcia Memorial Research and Medical Center, and an adjunct professional associate in the Faculty of Health at University of Canberra, Australia. This is also to inform everyone that she is the former program chair of the PWU School of Nutrition. Without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce Dr. Divina Christy Redondo Samin. Good afternoon, Dr. Redondo.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Nessa, for that very nice introduction. A pleasant and lovely afternoon to everyone. Before I proceed to my presentation, the present na ni Ms. Nessa. Okay, thank you. All right, so before I proceed to my, as I've mentioned, before I proceed to my presentation, please allow me to thank the PWU Medical Specialist and Diagnostic Center headed by Professor Nini Lim. I'd like to thank also Ms. Nessa Ceballos and the School of Nutrition for this very kind invitation. You know, I really can say no to a former student who was very bright and diligent during the time that I was in PWU. So, eto na, okay? So, parang pagbabalik sa PWU. Okay, so for this afternoon, I am tasked to present to you the role of, can you go back again, Ms. Nessa? The role of nutrition in strengthening the immune system. This is my outline. Okay, so we'll discuss with you the health effects of COVID-19 containment measures. We'll also present to you the nutritional consequences of COVID-19 infection and the link of nutrition and immunity with non-communicable diseases. And I will also present to you the individual and population interventions to improve our diet. And when we improve our diet, we also aim to achieve better immunity. Next slide, please. Okay. It's about 15 months, no? So it's about 15 months since the pandemic outbreak. And the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the implementation of measures in order to halt the spread of infection. And so government, not only in the Philippines, but also worldwide or internationally, they have enforced this lockdown and containment measures. And this include we have the travel ban, travel restrictions, social distancing, quarantine, and isolation. And all this, it led to an extended period of time at home. So mas madami yung oras natin sa bahay. And this figure shown to you right now, this is the summary of the effects of government restrictions on lifestyle behaviors. So there's less physical activity, decrease in sleeping hours, okay? And most of this could be because of increase in screen time. So I'm sure most of you have watched a lot of Netflix and Korean telenovelas and series, no? For some, there's an increase in anxiety and stress, which also led to poor sleep quality. And this is especially among those who have been working and then suddenly they cannot work anymore, or they were laid off from their employment, okay? The lockdown also results to more orders from, I'm sure you're very familiar with Grab, Food Panda, no? So it has increased this meal frequency, snacking, because it's easily available. And there's noted increased intake of ultra-processed foods, but less on protein and even fruits and vegetables. Okay. And so we have observed the development of even muscle mass loss with all these factors, no? And also in the presence of caloric excess with the overconsumption of ultra-processed and high-caloric foods, there's what we call now sarcopenic obesity, or yung obese, mataba, pero mas konti ang laman, ano? It's associated with a significantly increased risk of multiple comorbidities, which include a cardiovascular disease, diabetes. There's also osteoporosis, considered as a chronic disease. There's also an increase in the cognitive decline and the increase in the depression among people who were isolated, who are in quarantine. And this increased also the risk of COVID-19 infection and severity. So with all these non-communicable diseases, so this is the long-term health risks which were noted already upon when this lockdown started since last year. Okay, so we don't have a local study yet, but just to mention to you, there's a study presented at the American Diabetes Association, and it was noted that more U.S. children had hospitalization for new onset of type 2 diabetes during the time of COVID-19 pandemic. It's also noted that the conditions that normally warrant ICU admissions are higher compared with before the pandemic. Okay, so the researchers said that this may be due to weight gain from staying at home, from too much staying at home. Of course, we cannot do anything about it. We have to stay at home. No, this results also to less physical activities, more sedentary behaviors, there's sleep disturbances, and greater intake of processed foods among children. In fact, in my own clinic, I have noted also the increased referral for management of obese children who happen to develop obesity during the time of lockdown. Okay, next slide, please. So with this information, it is important for for everyone to be aware of the relationship between nutritional status, diet, and viral respiratory infection. So we have this relationship between malnutrition, as shown in this figure, dietary imbalance or the unbalanced diet, obesity, and impaired immune response, leading to greater susceptibility to severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus infection, or the SARS-CoV-2 infection, as presented earlier by Dr. Nilos. Okay? So nutritional status is related, we have to be aware that nutritional status is related to inflammation, as that both malnutrition and at the same time the presence of obesity, they can alter the innate and adaptive immune responses in the body. And this can increase now the risk of infection by various pathogens. Okay? And so we have to know that there is this synergic vicious cycle wherein the infection induces a response that produces fever. So na-mention kanina ni Doc Nilos yan, no? Increased catabolism, which can result to loss of muscle mass and even loss of appetite and altered intestinal absorption. And this can be manifested as diarrhea if a person is infected with COVID-19. Okay. Now, these changes increases the nutritional demands. So, and in addition to that, with the loss of appetite, so if there's a loss of appetite, additional loss of appetite as seen mostly in COVID-19 patients, it can induce or aggravate malnutrition. Another one is the unbalanced diet. So the unbalanced diet caused by consumption of refined sugars. I'm sure most of you, because of, some boredom, maybe from stress, they eat more hydrogenated fats, like yung hydrogenated fats that can be obtained from eating too much donuts, biscuits, cookies. No, other foods include poorly digested allergenic proteins, processed and ultra-processed foods, as seen in our chips, very, very flavorful chips. No, it can increase the inflammatory index of the diet, and this has been associated with respiratory infection of the airway. Okay. Now, besides that, this dietary pattern from this unbalanced diet provides a small content of vitamins and minerals, which can be deficient in malnutrition and as seen also in obesity. Now, please take note that the vitamins and minerals are very essential for immunocompetence against infections. All right, so next slide, please. So if someone get infected with COVID-19, there will be a bidirectional interaction between nutrition, particularly if there's undernutrition or obesity, infection, and immunity. Next slide, please. All right. So this evidence would suggest that if there's a nutritional insult to this cell-mediated and humoral immunity, as shown in the figure. Next, please. Okay. With the presence of malnutrition, it can contribute now to the abnormalities of inflammation. So when we have inflammation, there's an alteration of this cellular and this humoral immunity. So there could be inflammation. So parang yun yung body kapag meron nagtatry mag-invade, may infection, may stress, so the body's own system would be responding as inflammation. And this is a key component of immune response. Okay, so these abnormalities of inflammation would depend now whether we have an optimum health or not. And what we need to remember is that there should be a balance. So if we have an optimum health, there could be a balance of inflammatory response. So whenever there's infection or there's an invader or any toxin or infection, there could be an upregulation of this immune system, which could possibly increase the production of some pro-inflammatory cytokines, as previously mentioned by Dr. Nilos, no? Or after some time, there could be a downregulation of excessive immune response, which can decrease now in your pro-inflammatory cytokines, increased tissue regeneration. There could be repair of body tissues damage or cellular damage as brought about by the infection or the inflammation. Okay, next slide, please. So if we have a healthy immune system, our body will have a healthy immune response. So what's the response of our body if we have a healthy immune response? So the infected cells can be rapidly cleared, the virus can be inactivated by the neutralizing antibodies, okay? And then, of course, consequently, there would be a minimal inflammation and lung damage, particularly if we have this COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, if the body is infected with COVID-19 and there is a poor health or there's poor immunity in the body, there could be a dysfunctional immune response. So what can happen to the body? There could be excessive infiltration of these monocytes and macrophages and T cells. So ito yung mga defense cells ng katawan natin, ano? And thereby, consequently, magkakaroon ng systemic cytokine storm, which was also mentioned by Dr. Nilo. So in effect, once COVID-19 is inside the body, it invaded the pulmonary or the lung system, it can result to pulmonary edema and pneumonia. For some, it could be a very worse pneumonia, especially in the elderly. And there could be widespread inflammation in the body, and this could result now to multi-organ damage. So even if they enter so if for COVID-19 patients, if they enter the hospital with just a simple infection or with just COVID-19 infection, consequently, they can have multiple organ damage. It start with cardiorespiratory failure, renal failure, so lung failure. So all this can be experienced by someone who get infected with COVID-19 and with dysfunctional immune response. Next slide, please. All right. So it's very important that that we have to be aware of the things or the risk factors which can weaken our immune system. Okay, so we have all these factors, so we have to be aware that aside from infection, there are other things or factors which can weaken our immune system, and this include medication, especially for cancer patients, for example. Now they're taking steroids, okay, and that could actually weaken the immune system. And then of course toxins from the environment, and then there's modern lifestyle, as I've mentioned, increase in screening time, and then you have late sleep and you have less sleeping hours. Okay, so that can actually affect the inflammatory response. And then the presence of, just the thought of having pandemics, the pandemic still here, it gives us stress. The toxic people around us, or the work, okay, so that could also contribute to stressful moments, and that could also possibly weaken the immune system. And then of course there's poor nutrient intake and unhealthy nutrition, and also lack of exercise. So all this can actually contribute to decreasing the immune system. And it's important that we have to control this inflammatory response by controlling some of these modifiable risk factors. Okay. Next slide, please. So once the body is infected with COVID-19, these are the nutritional consequences. Okay, so there could be, so always depending on the immunity or the immune system of the person, a severe respiratory infections can actually induce inflammatory syndrome, and that could result to hypercatabolism, which can lead to loss of muscle mass, and this will actually warrant more energy expenditure, which is linked to higher ventilatory load or ventilatory work, and that could mean increased energy and protein requirements. And so important that, for COVID-19 patients, important that we actually nourish them and they have adequate food intake from a variety of food, so that we would be able to provide all the necessary macronutrients and micronutrient needs as demanded by the presence of COVID-19 infection. And then we also have to remember that with COVID-19, the food intake can be reduced by several factors. So one is the anorexia, secondary to the infection itself. So COVID-19 disease can actually cause loss of appetite. In fact, when somebody complains of loss of appetite, even this loss of smell, okay, loss of taste. So we always now consider, we always have in our mind, that this patient or this person may be infected with COVID-19. Now, the stress itself, if the patient is confined in the hospital and become isolated, all alone in the hospital, so this could also lead to a decrease in food intake, as well as some, organizational problems which can limit attendance at meals. And so all these factors can actually contribute to malnutrition. And we have noted that these are some of the nutritional consequences of having this COVID-19 disease. All right. Next slide, please. Okay. So what we need to remember is we have to, we have to fight this COVID-19, and we have to make ourselves ready for this infection, because hindi na mawawala yung infection. Nandyan na siya sa atin, okay? And so what we have to remember is that we have to protect ourselves. We have to have a weapon against this COVID-19, and one of this is a strong immune system, okay? Next slide, please. All right. So one important weapon, as I've mentioned, is a very good natural protection against invaders. And this is in the form of our natural barriers in the body, okay, our innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. Next slide, please. Okay. So with our innate immune system, ito yung body's first line of defense. So sila yung parang mga frontliners natin. So frontliners ng katawan natin. So when something or an infection or like COVID-19 tries to enter the body, have entered the body, so it will activate the macrophages, all this yung frontliners, yung sabi natin first line of defense, the neutrophils and other cells, to attack and destroy this infection or these invaders or outsiders. It's very important that we have a very good nutritional status, because when we have undernutrition or overnutrition, and these are forms of malnutrition, so the malnutrition status can negatively affect immune function. It can reduce the antibody responses and can decrease the resistance to infections. More so, or in addition to this, if we have nutritional deficiencies or nutrient deficiencies, particularly from vitamins and minerals, from trace elements, okay, and we have suboptimal status in our micronutrients, these can impair the immune functions. Next slide, please. So our goal is to optimize our nutritional status, because your nutritional status is needed for a well-functioning immune system. And it's important, it's a very important factor to protect ourselves against all these viral infections, particularly this COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. And so, okay, can you click another one? All right, so it's important that that we control the risk factors that I have mentioned. So there are modifiable risk factors contributing to inflammatory response, or from the imbalance of inflammatory response in the body, like unbalanced diet, lifestyle mismanagement, or even dietary patterns, or physical inactivity. So we have to control all these risk factors so that we be able to balance. Okay, so we can target treatment and healthy lifestyle choices, such as this balanced diet, so we can also balance the response of our body from this, or the inflammatory response from this infection, or from the invaders. Okay, and so we would want to aim that there's a balance of this inflammatory manifestations towards a homeostasis. So we want to have a balance. So yung kanina pinakita kong slides, no? So kailangan magkaroon ng balance yung upregulation of the pro-inflammatory cytokines, and later on downregulation of this pro-inflammatory cytokines, so that our body can regenerate and then and repair other tissues and cells affected by the damage of the infection. Okay, next slide, please. And so people in almost every region in the world could benefit from, again, we keep on emphasizing this, the rebalancing of diet to eat an optimal amount of various foods and nutrients, and not just an over intake or an overconsumption of hydrogenated fats from as seen in this slide. Like we have a lot of hamburgers, a lot of fast foods, a lot of donuts, no? So what we would want to have is a balance of a healthy diet, which can provide the necessary macronutrients, your carbohydrate, your protein, and fat. Okay, do sa mga estudyante ng mga 80s and 90s are go, grow, and glow foods. Okay, so this could actually this balance or this intake of a balanced diet can actually lead to an optimum immunity for our body. Okay, now how can we recognize a healthy diet? We keep on emphasizing a healthy diet, an optimal diet. So how can we recognize a healthy diet? So next slide, please. So it has 5 characteristics. What is important to consider is that, one, okay, there's an adequate amount of a different variety of your different composition of your carbo, your protein, your fat, and you also have your micronutrients coming from your fruits and vegetables. And then there's a balance. So hindi naman porket bawal na si sugar, no? So there's just a balance of, not taking too much sugar, not taking too much fat. So there should be a balance of everything, a moderation of each food group, and a calorie control, of course, for us not to gain weight or become obese later on. And overall, to have a variety of not only one food every day, but also to include a lot of, a variety of food and meals or viands, which can provide us with all the necessary macronutrients of carbo, protein, and fat, and also your micronutrients. Next slide, please. All right. Now for the next, I think 4 slides, these slides will show you the foods that are particularly high in amount of these micronutrients, which can possibly optimize in maintaining the host immunocompetence. So we have these micronutrients, like important micronutrients that I keep on mentioning is that include your vitamin D, which can be seen or we can have it from green vegetables, the legumes, the egg yolks, cheese, beef, tuna, mackerel, and even soy. So and on the third column, you can see how the physiological effects. So it can actually downregulate the pro-inflammatory cytokines, which I keep on mentioning when there's the invasion of an infection. Okay, there's vitamin C. As commonly we know that citrus fruits are rich with vitamin C, but also green vegetables are rich in vitamin C, and consequently the effect would be to increase our antibody production and also increase our barrier support, especially when the epithelium or the epithelial barriers are affected with COVID-19, as in sa mga epithelial barriers in the lungs at saka in the intestine. Next slide, please. Okay, then there's vitamin B2. Okay, so you have it from eggs, leafy greens, or green leafy vegetables, liver, kidney, heart, or yung mga lamang loob. And then you, of course, you have your malted barley, okay, and some yeast. Vitamin B3, as seen in most of high or omega-3 containing fish like tuna and salmon. Then it's also rich in coffee and poultry. And then you have your vitamin B6, your vitamin B12, which can increase the leukocyte production and increase the lymphocyte production, which are the frontliners or the first line of defense as well against invasion or against infection. Next slide, please. Okay, then there's vitamin E. This is very common and very popular among women, so they take a lot of supplements from this, but actually vitamin E is very rich in plant-based oils, nuts, seeds, grain nuts, and even our fruits and vegetables. And this is very important as well to counter-regulate or down-regulate some pro-inflammatory cytokines, which can be activated with the presence of infection. Okay, and then of course there's vitamin A, seen in our orange, yellow, and green leafy vegetables and fruits, and it's very important also in increasing the lymphocyte activity, increasing our defense against infection. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so these are some of the Other important trace elements, the iron, the zinc, selenium, and even special nutrient or like your omega-3 fatty acids found in fish oil, walnuts, pumpkin seeds, vegetable oils. Okay, so they have anti-inflammatory effects, and that could also again counter-regulate the high inflammatory response from the body when it's infected, especially with COVID-19. Next slide, please. All right. Now, while data regarding nutrition in coronavirus infection are not yet available at this time, there are several reviews and evaluation of evidences from previous clinical trials that studied nutrition-based interventions for viral diseases with special emphasis on respiratory infections. And this is the summary of their observations. So these are the micronutrients that they have included in the study. So they have included vitamin C, and they have noted that in terms of prevention, the supplementation may be ineffective, but during treatment, supplementation may be effective. Vitamin A, the supplementation may be effective as a form of preventing infection. Also during treatment once there's infection already. Now, in terms of vitamin D or the sunshine vitamin, supplementation may be effective, especially those who are deficient. Lalo na at this time now, for 1 year, there are really a lot of children who may be deficient already from vitamin D because of the lack of sunshine. Hindi nakakaalis sa bahay, nasa loob lang ng bahay. And this is especially true also for cold countries na walang masyadong araw. So we're actually lucky here sa Philippines now. We're a tropical country, and yet vitamin D deficiency can still be seen among children or certain population like the elderly who are not exposed to an adequate amount of sunlight. Okay, so this can lead to vitamin D deficiency, and they have noted that supplementation may be effective, especially for those who are in quarantine or in isolation. Okay. In terms of treatment, it's important first that they have recommended that we have to check first the serum level of vitamin D, okay, before we treat it. Actually, in my own practice, we, especially for COVID-19 patients and severe COVID-19 patients, we always include vitamin D level determination for our patients, for us to be able to treat it early, because they have noted that vitamin D insufficiency, more so vitamin D deficiency, is associated with a bad prognosis and associated also with increased mortality among patients. Then there's also vitamin D, E. Unfortunately for us prevention, if you take too much vitamin D, E, supplementation may be harmful. So it's not good taking too much of vitamin E. So according to the review, so it may be harmful instead of giving a protection from the infection. Also with treatment, we're very careful with it. Even before pandemic, we have a lot of studies already and evidences that it cannot be given too much, because supplementation may actually be more harmful to the body instead of giving benefit to the patient. Okay. Then there's zinc and selenium. So these are both trace elements, but considered as very good as antioxidants, and they have recommended that supplementation as a prevention and during treatment, these can be effective when you give zinc and selenium. And then of course there's copper, which is also a trace element. The supplementation may be effective as a part of prevention, but in terms of treatment, the supplementation may not be beneficial, maybe because we don't have much evidences right now. Okay, next slide, please. All right. Now, at this time of pandemic, we have to realize how important to have. I'm sure everyone realize now, sana, no, that how important to have an optimum health and to have good or better immunity. And we have to realize that it has been shown from reported data and evidences worldwide that specific non-communicable diseases or chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, diabetes mellitus, hypertension, cancer, osteoporosis, this can worsen the prognosis and outcome of COVID-19 patients. And so I'd like to present to you also the link between immunity and nutrition with these NCDs, or non-communicable diseases. Next slide, please. So according to WHO, 3/4 of the world's deaths, or 70 million, are attributable to non-communicable diseases, okay? And almost 2/3 of these non-communicable disease deaths are linked to these modifiable risk factors, which include tobacco use, harmful use or overconsumption of alcohol, the unhealthy eating or the unbalanced diet consumption, and this physical inactivity. Okay, so we have to be aware that with these NCDs, with the deaths of these NCDs, all these are linked. As I've mentioned, 2/3 of these are linked with these modifiable risk factors. Next slide, please. Another click, please. All right, and let me just show you that in terms of diet, they have noted that all these dietary patterns, like the low consumption of diets, of fruits, vegetables, low in legumes, low in whole grains, low in nuts and seeds intake, low in milk, low in fiber, low in calcium, low in seafood, particularly or specifically the omega-3 fatty acid rich seafoods, and low in polyunsaturated fatty acids. And together with the high consumption of red meat, processed meat, the SSBs or the sugar sweetened beverages, the high intake of trans fatty acids, and the high consumption of sodium rich foods, they are all associated with these non-communicable diseases. Next slide, please. And let me also mention that these are the 3 leading dietary risk factors for deaths and disability associated life years. So the intake of sodium, the intake of whole grains, and the low intake of fruits. And they are associated with millions of deaths worldwide and DALYs. Okay, next slide, please. And so with our current diet, okay, with our current Filipino diet, so it's a melting pot for actually all these diseases, all these non-communicable diseases. And all these non-communicable diseases are actually associated also with inflammation. Next slide, please. And so the risk for COVID-19 patients, with patients or persons with non-communicable diseases like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes, okay, they are at risk for severe illness once they have acquired it. So aside from what I've mentioned, those patients with cancer, those with chronic kidney disease, so unfortunately, our president died of it. So he had renal failure, no? So kaya mas mataas din yung risk niya for severity if in case nga kung nagkaroon siya ng COVID-19. Even people with COPD or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, like those with asthma and those with immunocompromised state, those who are obese, okay? So those who are obese, those with serious heart conditions such as heart failure, coronary artery disease, and cardiomyopathy. So imagine that if you have those conditions and then they are obese, that could put higher risk for severity of illness when they have COVID-19. So other than that, I've mentioned already type 2 diabetes. And what is the population greatly affected by this? It's the elderly population. And that's why we're very careful for elderly. Kaya nga, we keep on urging all the elderly as much as possible that they also get vaccinated, because most of them actually have these diseases, these chronic illnesses, or this non-communicable diseases. So put them together, you have one risk factor of being an elderly, you're aging, and then you have another risk factor of having all these non-communicable diseases. All right, so, and then you have a factor of stress, toxins and smoking. So that could lead to possible severity of once COVID-19, once this patient or this person is infected with COVID-19. Next slide, please. So as with all these non-communicable diseases, the presence of non-communicable diseases with COVID-19 infection, altogether, this can also result to malnutrition. Remember earlier, I've mentioned already that there is a vicious cycle of decreasing immunity or decreased immunity with malnutrition, more so if somebody else or if that person is infected with a certain pathogen like COVID-19. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and that's why we have to be very aware and we have to understand that non-communicable diseases as attributed to some risk factors and conditions can make people more vulnerable to becoming severely ill once they get COVID-19. And so what are these risk factors? Smoking. Okay, so smokers are noted to are likely to be more vulnerable to COVID-19 as the act of smoking means that fingers which possibly contaminated cigarettes are in contact with lips, which increases the possibility, of course, of transmission of virus from hand to mouth. Okay. Other than that, smokers may also already have lung disease, like yung meron ng lung cancer or may COPD na or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and they have reduced lung capacity, which would greatly increase the risk of a serious illness once they get infected with COVID-19. What else? Smoking products such as water pipes. So yung mga nagsisigarilyo dyan ng mga what's that? Yung mga e-cigarettes, no? So often they involve the sharing of mouthpieces and hoses, which could also facilitate the transmission of COVID-19 in communal and social settings. What else? The conditions that increase oxygen needs or reduces the ability of the body to use it properly will put patients definitely at a higher risk of the consequences of bilateral viral pneumonia. And that's why we're very particular. That's why we keep on looking at the O2 or the oxygen saturation of a person, especially that if that person is suspected to have COVID-19, because we would want to, maintain or at least maintain a higher delivery of oxygen. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So for people living with or affected by the non-communicable diseases that I have mentioned, so sino-sino to mga to? So yung mga people of all ages can be infected by the new coronavirus. So walang, as Dr. Nilos mentioned earlier, so walang sinisino tong coronavirus. Bago to eh. So lahat ng ages, lahat ng mayaman, mahirap, so everybody can be affected or infected by this COVID-19. And the risk of becoming severely ill with the virus appears to increase if you are more than 60 years old. And that's why worldwide, the priority after the healthcare workers, the next priority is always the elderly population. And that's why we keep on encouraging our elderly, our lolas and lolos to vaccinate themselves. Okay, so because once they have COVID-19, they have noted that there's an increased severity of this infection among this population. Okay. Now, people with pre-existing non-communicable diseases also appear, as I keep on mentioning it, to be more vulnerable to becoming severely ill with the virus. And they have noted that those with cardiovascular disease, those with hypertension, those with COPD, diabetes, and cancer, so they can become more severe. And that's why in the vaccination program, sila yung A3. Kaya nga after the elderly, sila naman yung sinusunod. Kasi it has been there are reports and evidences already that the severity of COVID-19 infection is observed among this group. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So what's our plan now? What's our strategy? So from the previous slides that I have presented, so are you going to eat less of the foods found in your on the left screen, on the left side of the screen, or would you eat more of these foods as seen in your right side of the screen? So what's the choice? So what's the plan? Next slide, please. All right. So this is the individual approach that we would want to strategize for us to be able to, counteract the effect of COVID-19 infection. So there's no, because of the lack of data, or maybe because of lack of studies done, we keep on emphasizing, and the clinical nutrition community group always focus on the individual approach of achieving a healthy diet or a better immunity through this individual approach. So one is really to achieve a normal weight range. So we have to stay within the normal weight range. We try not to be overweight. We try not to be obese. And so we need to be lean and within our normal body mass index range. So if you're not yet familiar with it, we have a lot of calculators, and even yun nga, no? So even the School of Nutrition has its nutrition clinic, no? So in which they can compute for your normal BMI, but it's so easy to compute nowadays with the availability of several apps, no? And we really have to avoid weight gain increase in even the waist circumference. Some people are lean, and yet their waist circumference is high. And so we have to manage that, because even lean people with high waist circumference beyond the normal is also associated to developing cardiovascular disease as well. Okay, so that's our main goal. Make sure that we aim for the normal weight range, and we don't we don't make ourselves overweight or obese. And another approach is to really achieve regular physical activities. Of course, as I've mentioned, the isolation or the lockdown has resulted to less physical activities, particularly for those patients or for those individuals who go to gym regularly. But you have a lot of if you don't have the access, there are very good opportunities to increase our physical activities by doing our household chores, like washing your car, which can give off 100 to 150 calories when you wash your car, or do floor mopping to make sure that there's no infected slippers, after yung mga infection na pagpasok sa bahay hindi nag-aalis ng slippers, no? So you do floor mopping of daily floor mopping, and it can possibly definitely increase your physical activity. Okay, what else? Energy dense or calorie dense foods which are lacking in micronutrients need to be limited. In fact, they have recommended that calorie content should not exceed 125 kcal per 100 grams of food, as they promote obesity. And if you know how to read the labels, so you can actually see if the food is energy dense. Like for example, in the chips, no? So in just one small packet of chips, it will give you like 300 calories. It only contains 30 grams or 40 grams of the chips, and yet it gives off 300 calories. So that's an example of your energy dense foods. And also the fast foods. I'm sure you're very familiar with the fast foods. We keep on ordering from Food Panda or Grub with all these fast foods, and also with this sugar sweetened beverages. So the reminder would be really for this food to be taken sparingly. Okay, so not regularly, but should be taken very rarely or sparingly. Next. All right, take more of foods of plant origin. So actually for this pandemic, ang daming naging vegetarian. So a lot of people develop or seek nutritionist or professional help na gusto nilang maging vegetarian. So, but from the recommendation, in fact, yun nga sinasabi that we have to take more of this plant foods, no? So, such as these non-starchy vegetables and fruits, and the recommendation for us not to have these non-communicable diseases is the intake of at least 300 to 400 grams of these fruits and vegetables. So it has been noted, it has been evidenced by a lot of research studies that the intake of more than 400 grams or about 400 grams of these fruits and vegetables would decrease the exposure, reduce the risk of individuals to non-communicable diseases like coronary heart disease and diabetes. Okay, now limit red meat intake. The recommendation only for red meat is only 100 grams per week. not per day, not per day. So that's the limitation. And they have noted that if you go beyond 100 grams of meat, red meat per day, it's already associated with an increased risk for stomach cancer and even coronary heart disease. Okay, so dito 300 grams pa lang but in the recent study of the global burden of disease in 2017, they have noted only 100 grams. Okay, and there's also the limitation of salt intake from all sources, whether it's cooking salt, salt-preserved home foods, and processed foods. So lalo na nung lockdown, lahat ng yata ng LGUs wala nang ibinigay kundi mga delata, sardinas, corned beef, and all of these canned foods are very high. Even what's that? Yung noodles, the instant noodles, So all these foods, all these processed foods can actually exceed the daily intake of the salt to only 5 to 6 grams per day. So it's very important that we have to recognize this, that most of the processed foods are really high in salt, and they have noted that more than 1 gram per day of intake from high sodium or high salt foods, that is already associated with high in non-communicable disease like coronary heart disease and also some form of cancer. Next slide, please. All right, and then of course for mothers, we keep on promoting, encouraging breastfeeding at this time, especially for children. So sabi ko nga sa inyo, all ages are affected, all life cycles are affected with COVID-19, and so we would also want to protect our babies from this COVID-19 and for them to improve their protection. So we encourage breastfeeding, as we know that breast milk is still the best for babies, as compared to commercial formulas. And there's also the limitation of alcohol intake. All right. And then, of course, I would want to emphasize also that there should always be a cautious intake of dietary supplements. I have presented, like, for example, a while ago that when you take too much vitamin in your diet or in your supplements, instead of being beneficial, it could be harmful in the body. And so it's important that you have to be very careful with the intake of some of the dietary supplements, unless of course you are also guided by the doctors and that and you have medical problems that need medical supervision in terms of dietary supplements. Okay, next slide, please. All right, now these 9 individual approaches that I have mentioned earlier target individuals, and there's, as I mentioned, it's an individualist approach, which also include, I forgot to mention, nutritional counseling and these are effective. However, often we have limited coverage or limited, access to an individualized approach of having a very nutritious food, like, seeking help of nutritionists, although ngayon mas mabilis na because there's telemedicine or telenutrition. But the population-based interventions that I would want to present to you can have a broader effect. It can be more cost-effective because it's lower cost, and there's a greater sustainability to reduce potential disparities of what I have mentioned earlier. So, example of this is, having this activity, having this lecture as part of your campaign, of your mass media campaign or your campaign in the university, educating the staff and employees of PW and the PW and other PW communities as well, or their family members. So this is an important aspect of improving the diet and achieving better immunity of other individuals. And I think I've mentioned already, it's important to nutrition labels, no? So you want to read nutrition labels and would want to have information. And this is, I think, a call for policy as well, that for all processed foods, it should be properly labeled, because not all foods that are being bought in the market, they have proper nutrition labels. And of course, there's economic incentives, like, for example, in our hospitals. So we shy away from drinking sodas or sugar sweetened beverages like sodas, no. So there's an economic incentive na yon. So we have more food or more, parang pabaon when they don't serve they don't serve Coke or sodas, no. And then schools, of course, we keep emphasizing the role of schools like PWU, the university, that we make sure that we offer balanced diet. We offer foods that are rich in, not only from macronutrients but also micronutrients. And this is important way of improving the diet of our students. Although at this time, of course, we don't have face-to-face classes, and that could limit this campaign. But maybe later on, when everybody and the universities and colleges are allowed to have the face-to-face classes, maybe it's important that you may also consider putting in quality food, more healthy foods in the school canteens. Okay. Of course, workplaces, most of us are working from, most of you are working from home, no? Hindi pala kami kasama doon. So, most of you, or some of you may would go to the university, and then you have your own baons, or maybe you order from Foodpanda or Grab. It's important that maybe later on to come up with a policy kung ano yung mga pagkain na dapat na meron lang. Like for example, there are really some institution, or I think there's one hospital or two, or a university or a college, a school, in which they have imposed no soft drinks policy inside the school, no? Okay, and that would definitely improve the diet of the students kasi wala, or the employees kasi wala silang nabibiling mga sodas. All right, there's of course the help of the local environment. The LGU is very important, no? So I would not emphasize that anymore. I'm sure with this pandemic, you have seen how important you vote for the right people for your province or for your town kasi sila talaga yung tutulong din sa atin how healthy food can be available in the market or in the workplace. And then of course there's restriction and band-aids, and lastly yung agricultural, and this is more of a policy, and then this is more of a concern from the LGUs and even national, that we focus on planting more fruits and vegetables aside from whole wheats, or from planting rice na more with brown rice. Okay, so para mas ma-achieve natin yung tinatawag nating high fiber, healthy diet for our food plate. Okay, so although this is not really the focus of, as I've mentioned, this is the population interventions. These are really not the focus of the university, but at least in somehow you would be able to contribute to this and be able to improve the diet, because we know that if the diet is improved, we can have better immunity. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I think this is the next slides would be the last. Okay, so just to give you some of the general dietary guidelines during COVID pandemic and vaccination. So I've mentioned the individual approach, some of the population intervention approach, but let me just give you a general dietary guidelines for us to improve our health, and then achieve optimum health and better immunity during this time of pandemic, pre and post vaccination time. Next slide, please. All right, in terms of diet, would really want to promote the high intake of fruits and vegetables. I keep on emphasizing fruits and vegetables, although for some it would be very costly, lalo na nung nawalan tayo masyado ng the food system itself. We have a problem with the food system in the Philippines, but still we would like to encourage the intake of vegetables, lalo na yung mga vegetables na madali namang itanim. And I know this because kasi even yung alugbati, if kung alam niyo yung alugbati, yung mga kangkong, Chinese kangkong, they can actually live doon sa pat, I have these plants sa Manila. So it's very important that, so hindi pwedeng sabihin wala kaming access to vegetables. In our own small way, we can produce our own vegetable. So again, we would want to promote the high intake of fruits and vegetables to balance everything, and so that it can provide all the essential nutrients, particularly micronutrients for health. Then we follow any healthy diet except for fad diets, okay? Lalo na yung ketogenic diet, try to shy away from it. That provides an adequate amount of the recommended nutrient intakes, which can really support immune function. If you remember the slide that I have mentioned earlier, yung balanced diet, no? Yung balance of we don't want to have the imbalance of the inflammatory response because of the healthy diet. So we'd really want to promote any healthy diet that could support this immune function. And of course, for people who are deficient in micronutrients, so there are really people who cannot take much of these fruits and vegetables, they may warrant supplementation of vitamins and minerals, or just modify their dietary patterns, particularly for our vulnerable populations like the elderly population. Okay, next slide, please. Now, in terms of exercise, all right, I've mentioned that because of the lockdown, because of the travel restrictions, all right, so we have this less physical activities, but we try to achieve and maintain activity or moderate exercises even with our household chores at this time, because this can be beneficial in supporting our immune health, as exercise in any form will actually help maintain one's health. Just to be emphasized again, that lack of exercise could significantly affect a person's cardiovascular risk in the future. All right, lalo na yung lumalaki yung tiyan, lumalaki yung waist circumference, no? So that could affect your CVD risk later on. Also, exercise, however pala, exercise may not be advisable if you have a patient who is symptomatic COVID-19 patients, because the target would really be the lungs and the pulmonary, and would want to make sure that there's an adequate supply of oxygen in the body, and so exercise may not be allowed. Even some form of passive exercise, yung sobrang galaw sa bed, no? So there are patients, the symptomatic COVID-19 patients would not be advised to have this exercise or too much movement, because some COVID-19 infections can really exhibit rare cardiac complications that could be aggravated by physical exertion. And I've seen this in some of our severe, critically ill COVID-19 patients. Okay, next slide, please. All right, now, part of the problems during lockdown is the boredom, the presence of stress or depression, and sleep inadequacies. So you consider boredom and stress at this time. Always, you have to be aware and you have to recognize that there is boredom and stress at this time, because they are associated with increased food consumption. So nabobore, nasa-stress, so kain ng kain. So recognize this as a risk factor for obesity, and people inadvertently seeking comfort during this time of stress. So you have to be aware this can really happen, and so it's important that we have to manage at least stress. Maybe later on you can also for some of your activities, maybe you can also include stress management for patients, for individuals, no? Kasi it really has to be addressed. Mental health needs to be addressed as well. Okay, we have noted that there's sleep disturbances during isolation. In fact, for some of our inpatients, COVID-19 patients, so nawala yung good sleeping patterns nila kasi nga nasa hospital, lalo na yung matatanda, nawala yung thinking nila, ano ba ang araw, ano ba ang gabi, no? So it's important that we consider to follow a normal sleep cycle as possible, along with promoting following normal eating patterns. And this is actually to promote the synthesis of melatonin and serotonin at dinner. And that's why it's also important to consider na yung iba hindi kumakain ng dinner, ano? So kaya nga balance, kaya nga, adequate with a balanced and regular meal. So we keep on emphasizing that, because also if we don't, a certain dietary pattern can also affect the normal sleep sleeping pattern or the normal sleeping cycle. And that's very important because when you don't have adequate sleep, that could also promote an inflammatory response, and that could lead also to the release of the cytokines in the body or the pro-inflammatory cytokines in the body, and that would put our immunity at, in an imbalanced form. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and although this is not your cover, but let me just remind, or let me just let the audience be aware that during hospitalization, patients with COVID-19 can have severe anorexia or loss of appetite. And with COVID-19 infected patients, they can have a lot of this inflammation and increased markers of malnutrition. And so it's important that we have to be aware that during hospitalization, especially prolonged hospitalization, yung mga more than isang buwan na sa ospital, 2 buwan, 3 buwan, this may be accompanied by decrease in their weight, particularly the loss of muscle mass or the lean body mass. And this can further disadvantage at-risk patients, and they can put their immunity at a disadvantaged area. And it's important that we enhance the nutrition also to improve the response to therapy. And that's why we keep on emphasizing, kaya nga kain at this time na nasa pag nag-COVID, napunta sa hospital, we, instead of, kahit for example, they are diabetic, they are, they are hypertensive. So what is more important is they eat food, they eat it adequately. So yung some of the restrictions given to them before, inaalis muna namin, because what we would want is really for them to enhance their intake and their nutrition so that it can help in the totality or in the improvement of their infection with together with the other therapies. Next slide, please. All right. Now, just final consideration is that everyone itong mga panahon na to, a lot of ads, a lot of advertisements, no? So ang daming mga, ito, take mo to, vitamins, minerals, but you have to be aware that there's a considerable emerging quackery in relation to various foods. Like, mas okay ang ketogenic diet, magpapayat ka, o bawal lang obese ngayong mga panahon ng pandemic, so mas mabilis kang papayat with ketogenic diet in just one month or in just 1 week. So we have to be aware that there's, fad, quackery in relation to these dietary patterns, foods, and even nutrition. More studies, more formal research designs for us to be able to contribute to these hard evidences of nutritionals and micronutrient therapy in preventing COVID-19 infection. Next slide, please. So the key messages for my presentation is for everyone to provide sufficient nutritional care for the immune system, that we achieve optimal nutrient intake promotes optimal immune function, which can help to control the impact of COVID-19 infections and could help limit the emergence of a novel, more virulent strains of pathogenic viruses like COVID-19. So this is another pandemic, marami pang variants na lumalabas. So the latest is the Delta variant. So we have to protect ourselves and we have to optimize our immunity. And we have to recognize that unhealthy diets or unbalanced diets are now the biggest risk factor for acquiring infections, especially those with non-communicable diseases. And so it's important that we include nutritional strategies to improve health and to limit now the impact of COVID-19 infection. I think that's my last slide. So with this, I'd like to encourage everyone to put the power of inflammation-fighting foods on your plate. So you know it already. You just have to eat it more, or you just have to purchase and make it available more in your house and make it available on more available on your plate. Okay, next slide. So these are my references, and thank you very much for listening.
continue our webinar activity for this afternoon. So, Dr. Christy, maybe we can open the floor for some open forum. Ms. Julia, are you there?
Thank you, Miss Vanessa, and thank you again, no, Dr. Redondo. It was nice to see you again, our former professor and program chair in the School of Nutrition. Thank you for your presentation. We will now go ahead and take some time for questions directed to our second speaker for this afternoon. So without further ado, let me read our first question. The question is, how is proper nutrition these days be made possible?
Hi, Julia. Can you repeat the question again?
Sure, ma'am. Our participant is asking, how is proper nutrition these days be made possible?
Na nag-choppy yung word mo, no? Sorry ha. How can proper nutrition
These days be made possible?
Okay. So this day. So how can proper nutrition be made possible at this time of pandemic, no? As I've mentioned, we can do it in our own small ways, no? So for some of us, especially in Metro Manila, that we have, travel restrictions and we cannot go out in the market and just purchase our fruits and vegetables. As I've mentioned, very simple ways of doing, planting your own vegetable in your backyard. So kahit sabihin mong, if you don't have any backyard, you have the pots. I'm sure a lot of you have, we have a lot of plantitas and plantitos here in PWU, so you can plant instead of the household plants, ornamental plants. So instead of ornamental plants, maybe you can also plant your vegetables. So like it's very easy to just plant talong, eggplant, okra, and what else? You make sure that when you order something, it's not always fast food. So it's very easy, calling or pressing your app and then order for fast foods. But consider first that I'm not taking fruits and vegetable. Maybe I would order salad at this time, and also that maybe there's a lot of restaurant which offers a variety of food, not only fast food. So I think those are simple ways in which you can achieve proper nutrition at this time. Now, if there are individuals who cannot really take fruits and vegetables, and because of the limitation of the access, and at the same time they cannot cook fruits and vegetables, maybe this is the time that these individuals can actually have supplementation. You just have to be very careful if you have comorbidities or medical problems.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Christy. We already have our next question here now. Our participant would like to know how effective it is to our body the proper nutrition before and after COVID-19 vaccination.
Hindi ka yata nakinig. Yung nagtanong. Anyway, well, I've emphasized that, it's very important that our body is well prepared and that we have a very good immune response, okay? And so if we are undernourished, if we are overweight, that could actually, and we're not eating a balanced diet, that could actually overtake the balance in the diet, the balance in the body, the balance in the immune response. And also, before COVID-19 infection, it's important that we make sure that we eat a balanced diet. We don't overthrow this imbalances and make ourselves fat, obese, and expose ourselves to inflammation, because obesity is a chronic inflammatory state. And so if we have inflammation, if we have this chronic inflammatory state, that could result to the release of more pro-inflammatory cytokines if we get another infection in the form of COVID-19. Okay, and that can worsen our the severity, the effect of COVID-19. And if you, like, for example, take a lot of salt, a lot of sodium, and you can have this hypertension, or even for some, you get overweight and your sugar goes up. Okay, you develop impaired fasting glucose, you develop diabetes at this time of pandemic, and your body, once you get infection, it's not prepared. And the body could be, it could have a different response to COVID-19 infection, because it has already been reported that obesity and obesity in the presence of NCDs, or the non-communicable diseases like your diabetes and hypertension, can make the COVID-19 infection more severe. Okay. Now, post-infection, right? It's important again to achieve a balanced diet, an optimum nutrition. Why? Because there are effects of COVID-19. And I have seen this among our patients na yung mga matataba, pumayat. Pero more of payat ng muscle mass. Kasi nga, because of its hypercatabolic effect. The COVID-19 can really have a hypercatabolic effect. In fact, kung maririnig yung word na cytokine storm, okay, once na pumasok yan sa katawan, it can make you really lose weight, can really make you lose a lot of body mass, lean body mass. And so it's important that after COVID-19 infection, we make sure that we make ourselves healthy again. We try to gain the muscle mass lost during the infection, and we try to make our immunity better again by again removing not only diet. I have emphasized and I have presented, it's not only about diet, but some modifiable risk factors like sleep. We make sure that we get enough sleep and that we have physical activities. Okay, so pre and post, parehas lang. Pre and post COVID-19 infection, we have to protect our body at the same range. Yun lang do sa mga pasyente na who acquired certain like effects of or consequences of COVID-19 infection, like those who develop shortness of breath, heart problems, then definitely we have to be careful in some of the restrictions in terms of food and also the physical activities.
Thank you very much, Doc Christy, for emphasizing the role of nutrition for the pre and post COVID-19 vaccination. And another question, do you have any tips on losing weight during this pandemic, still making healthier food choices?
Just a disclosure also, I also gained weight during this pandemic. So not because mainly I have a very good diet. It's just that maybe because of the less physical activities and also the stress itself, working in the hospital, it gives you a stress too, and makes you eat more. But anyway, how can we lose weight? As I've mentioned, we can lose weight by exercising more, just doing physical activities. If you don't have the gym materials, or you don't have an access, of course, to gym because of its limitation, then you try to do physical activities like yun nga, sabi ko sa inyo, yung pagdidilig, car washing, that can give off some excess calories in the body, and we try to limit ourselves from eating too much while watching TVs. Okay, so those are some very simple tips that you can actually achieve. So remember, there are three important risk factors in achieving weight gain. One is the sedentary lifestyle, or decrease in physical activity. Second is in too much eating of high processed or ultra processed foods and high calorie dense foods like your sodas, your chips, all right, and your fast foods. And third is, of course, the disturbance in sleep. You address these three risk factors, you do not develop obesity or gaining weight. Okay, because of course, if you have more physical activities, you try to eat not too much of the calorie dense, you try to limit your calorie intake, and eat more fruits and vegetables, which can make you full. At the same time, you achieve a 6 to 8 to 10 hours of sleep, especially for teenagers. Okay, you have an adequate sleep of actually 8 to 9 hours per day, and then you lessen the risk of having this weight gain.
Thank you again, Dr. Christy. Let us now have a question from our Facebook Live participants. So the question is, there are research that post-COVID-19 disease creates a scar or damage in the lungs. Are there specific food that would heal or cure this?
All right. That's a very good question, and it's actually a difficult question, Hano. At this time, once you actually have the fibrosis, when you say yun, yung parang pilat, no? So fibrosis coming from the effect of pneumonia or the COVID-19 infection. It will take some time. Right? It's difficult to remove it already, and at this time, I don't think there are foods or any dietary patterns which can actually attenuate that scar. Okay, but I think what is important to consider is that we try not to aggravate it further. We try not to give more inflammation by eating unhealthy and super ultra processed foods. Okay, so in my last slide, I think I've mentioned, we try to put what we call anti-inflammatory foods in our plate, and so at this time, no, so wala pang makakapagsabi na itong food na to makakapag-alis niyan. But definitely there are certain foods like your fruits and vegetables and less intake of hydrogenated fats and trans fatty acids and less intake of the, as I've mentioned, ultra-processed foods can lessen the inflammation, which can further inflame the lungs.
Thank you for that very wonderful explanation, Dr. Christy. Our last question for this afternoon for you, Dr. Christy, is that could COVID-19 be passed through mishandled or improper handling of food during preparation?
Okay. That's a very common question, Hano. So, as I think it was already mentioned earlier from the first lecture and from our first speaker, how the mode of transmission of COVID-19, it's really respiratory. And so if of course, if there are virus dun sa mga food, and we have infected persons handling the food, and of course there's virus there, and so that could be actually inhaled also by a person, and so that could also lead to transmission of COVID-19. So it's more of not really the food itself, but it's also mishandling or the effect of a COVID-19 person infected preparing the food, which can put the virus there, and then a person can inhale it and then transmit now the COVID-19.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Redondo. Again, due to the interest of time, we will now have to close our question and answer forum for this afternoon's webinar. Apologies for the questions that we were not able to take today. Thank you very much for all the questions from our participants. And of course, thank you to our dear speakers for accommodating them. Now, Ms. Isa, I will give the floor back to you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Julia. Dr. Ramonette Tolentino will now award the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Redondo Sano.
The Philippine Women's University, Taft Avenue, Manila, in cooperation with the Medical Specialist and Diagnostic Center and School of Nutrition, present this Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Divina Christy Redondo Samin for sharing her knowledge and expertise as a resource speaker on the topic Crucial Role of Nutrition in COVID-19 Vaccination for the program Boost Your Immune System with Proper Nutrition, Pre- and Post-COVID-19 Vaccination on June 29, 2021 from 1 to 4 p.m. via Facebook Live, given this 29th of June 2021, signed by Dr. Nini Lim, Executive Director, MSDC, Ms. Vanessa Ceballos, Program Chair, School of Nutrition, and Mr. Marco Alfredo M. Benitez, University President.
Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome po.
Thank you, Dr. Samin. Okay, we would like to acknowledge our Facebook viewers from the different parts of the Philippines. We also have from Lyceum of the Philippines, University Laguna, Ilocos Norte, Pagudpod National High School, Floridel Elementary School, Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, Zamboanga Peninsula Polytechnic State University, Claveria, Misamis Oriental, Pilila Rizal, and Cabanatuan City, Nueva Ecija. Thank you very much. Okay, I would like to remind everyone to fill up the evaluation link shown on the screen and at the chat box until June 30, 2021 at 5 p.m. to receive a certificate of attendance. And to give us the synthesis, let us all have Ms. Nella Maki.
Thank you, Nurse Isa. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining us in this webinar. So let's have a recap about today's webinar. We have two brilliant and distinguished guest speakers for today, Dr. Samin and Dr. Nilius, who shared with us their expertise on their topics for this webinar. So our first speaker, Dr. Nilius, discussed the topic of COVID-19, the description of the disease and how it affects our community. And according to Dr. Nilius, in today's pandemic, our enemy is the COVID-19. It is a highly pathogenic and transmissible disease where the whole population is susceptible. Our sources of infection are from the COVID-19 patients, and as we are living in the new normal and our restrictions of quarantine has been lifted, we shall not forget that even people with no symptoms can transmit the virus. And we also get it from respiratory droplets and aerosols, or it is now airborne. So we are not yet out of danger from COVID-19. So, although there are decrease in cases since the surge last March. So to stop the COVID-19 infection, Dr. Nilius emphasized the importance of practicing the health and safety measures like the hand washing, social distancing, wearing face masks and face shields, and disinfecting our surroundings. But in addition to these measures, proper nutrition is also important in fighting the COVID-19 because it strengthens our immune system. Our second speaker, Dr. Samin, discussed with us the importance of nutrition in COVID-19 and also in pre and post vaccination. So in her lecture or in her presentation, our immune system is our first line of defense against any infection or any pathogen that will enter our body. But for our immune system to well function, we need to nourish it with proper nutrition. So as mentioned by Dr. Samin, there are general dietary guidelines that we should remember during this pandemic and as we have the COVID-19 vaccination. First is our diet. Basically, it should be eating healthy and balanced diets, plenty of fruits and vegetables where we can get all the essential nutrients that our body needs, because our bodies in this time of illness needs more energy and more protein. So also we need to supplement our body with vitamins to avoid micronutrient deficiency. We should remember our vitamin C, just like reiterated by Dr. Samin, our vitamin C, vitamin A, E, our iron and zinc, also our omega-3, so we can boost our immune system. Also, we need to exercise, have any form of exercise, even at home, because our bodies needs it to improve our immune system. And to combat stress, boredom, and sleep disturbances, we should practice regular sleep and eating patterns. We avoid stress eating, as Dr. Samin has said. During this quarantine, we frequently order from fast food through food deliveries. So as final thoughts from Dr. Samin and Dr. Nilius, we should always follow our minimum health standards like the hand washing, wearing face masks, and social distancing, and provide sufficient nutritional care for our immune system to promote optimal immune function and help control the impact of COVID-19 infection. So with that, we hope that this webinar will help us prepare our bodies, will help us strengthen our immune system, and prepare ourselves for the COVID-19 vaccination. Again, thank you for joining us in this webinar. Thank you for our guest. Back to you, Narcisa.
And for our closing remarks, let us hear from Dr. Nini Lim, Executive Director of Medical Specialists and Diagnostic Center and the overall chairperson of this program.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. For many months, we are in a very difficult situation as the country is being plagued by COVID-19. We need to have real efforts to find strategies to stop the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus and treat those who are infected. But we understand that there have been drawbacks. Number one, people's uncertainty about the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. And two, the limited supply of the vaccines in certain areas. We realize that the government agencies are exerting all efforts to solve these issues. And at our end, we can help through cooperation, collaboration, and networking with them in the implementation of the vaccination program and in following the health protocols. In the previous webinar that was held last April 29, the importance of vaccination against COVID-19 was stressed by our speakers. Through vaccination, we can achieve herd immunity, which can bring us to normalcy. Today, Dr. Nilios discussed comprehensively the COVID-19 causative agent, its nature, structure, its effects on our immune system, and its emerging variants of concern. Considering the impact of the COVID-19 infection on the body, Dr. Widondo Samin exhaustively discussed the factors that weaken our immune system, factors and ways on how we can strengthen our immune system through proper nutrition, and why it is important for our body in fighting more effectively the virus. I am sure we have benefited a lot from this webinar. The overriding message is we need to protect ourselves by getting vaccinated soonest and by strengthening our immune system and build up the needed antibodies against the virus through proper nutrition. So have a balanced diet and take everything in moderation. On behalf of the COVID-19 Vaccination Information Dissemination Campaign Committee, I would like to thank our university president, Mr. Marco Alfredo Benitez, for his inspiring and dynamic leadership, Dr. Felina Yang, Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Chancellor, and all other university officials for their continued support. We also thank our speakers, Dr. Bien Lilos and Dr. Redondo Samin, for their comprehensive and informative discussion on our webinar theme, Boost Your Immune System Pre and Post COVID-19 Vaccination. We are also grateful to those who have been involved in organizing this event, the various working committees. Their support, presence, and participation have been invaluable and certainly have helped make this event a success. And finally, we wish to thank all of you for attending and actively participating in the webinar. Our colleagues, faculty, students, friends, and guests, we look forward to seeing you again in the future when we discuss new topics as we continue our campaign for COVID-19 vaccination to meet the global challenge of the pandemic. Thank you. Stay safe and healthy. God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Lim. On behalf of PWU, I would like to thank everyone for watching our webinar entitled Boost Your Immune System with Proper Nutrition Pre- and Post-COVID-19 Vaccination. I would also like to extend my sincere appreciation to the PWU Medical Specialists and Diagnostic Center and the School of Nutrition, along with the working committees for making this program possible. Again, I am Isa Donna Togbo. Let us join together in singing the Philippine Women's University hymn. Thank you very much. Live healthy and stay safe with your loved ones.